Greetings, loyal listeners and new recruits. I'm Drew Deach.
I'm Travis Newton.
And this is GenreVision. Every week, Travis and I review and recommend horror films, action movies, fantasy flicks, sci-fi cinema, and more. And this week, we're closing out Scary Parents Month with, appropriately, the film Parents from 1989. Before we do that, just a quick call to action this week, and it's kind of a big one. We really need some new reviews on Apple Podcasts.
Yeah, reviews are absolutely crucial for performance on Apple Podcasts. If your podcast is going to go up the charts, if you're going to get new listeners, reviews are a really critical part of how they rank podcasts. It's getting even more important because they've finally started dividing categories into subcategories. Like now for movies and TV, they have subcategories for film history, film reviews, so on and so forth. So the more they continue to divide that up, the more important those reviews are going to get so that we can actually ascend through the, say, like the film reviews. The easiest way to do that, I've found, is on your Mac or PC. You just open up the iTunes or the Apple Podcasts app, go to the store, search for the podcast GenreVision on the store. We did have a write-in from listener C.D. Thomas, who was curious about how to do it on the iOS app. If you want to use Apple Podcasts on your iOS device to review or rate the podcast, open up the Apple Podcasts app, go to the search tab in the bottom right, search for GenreVision on the podcast's store. Once you find GenreVision, give that a little taparoo, scroll down to the point where you see reviews, and you will see a little button with a pencil icon that says write a review. Anyway, that's what we need from you guys right now. If you could, please spare a little bit of time, rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. That'll really make our week, and possibly more.
It means the world to us, and we will feature the review here on the show.
Amen.
Well, let's close out Scary Parents Month. I might have said week in the intro. I don't know.
Did you?
I might have.
Well, we'll find out later.
Just, post-production. We're closing out Scary Parents Month with Parents, a movie that neither of us had ever seen before. And I'll say this. If I had known the movie that Parents was, I don't think I would have selected it for our closing film of the month, because Parents is by no means the movie I expected it to be. This is directed by Bob Balaban. It's his directorial debut.
Who is Bob Balaban for people who don't know?
He's kind of a typically nerdy actor. You might know him. I think he's in Close Encounters.
He's also, if you've seen, what is the Wes Anderson movie that takes place on the little island?
Oh, Moonrise Kingdom. Yeah, he's the narrator character.
Anyway, if you look up Bob Balaban, you will see an absolute laundry list of little roles he's played as a character actor in movies you've seen. He's just all over the place. And for this movie to come out of him is kind of flabbergasting. I did not expect this to come out of this guy who plays these sort of nerdy characters in all these movies.
Well, my appraisal of Parents from before seeing it had been, okay, it stars Randy Quaid and Mary Beth Hurt. It's this very idyllic 50s take, and the core concept is that the young son finds out that his parents might be cannibals. And the entire kind of conversation I'd always seen around this movie was dubbing it as kind of a black comedy. And I assumed like, oh, okay, it's going to be a satirical comedy, maybe not as heightened, but more in the vein of something like Serial Mom. I thought it was going to be more outright comedic. Parents is not that.
No, the top genre listed for it on IMDb is comedy. I would kind of beg to differ. It is not all that outright funny.
I would call it a stretch to call it a comedy. Like it's a satire, but I don't know if I can call it a comedy.
I would agree. It's not really trying for jokes at any time in the story, or it's not really trying for big laughs. It's a pretty short movie at 81 minutes, but it's definitely sort of a substantial movie when you watch it. It is really moody. There's definitely a sense of humor at play in the film, but it's kind of a sadistic sense of humor. It's stuff that's not really designed to make you laugh, but stuff to kind of slap you a bit. The movie slaps you around. It is hard hitting.
Yeah, I mean, the basic story is, like we said, that this family, the Lemleys, moves to a new pitch perfect, very kind of Lumberton town, as we've talked about this whole month a couple times.
Yep. Set in the 50s. So it's got that idyllic 50s.
Well, yes.
Yeah, I don't think they ever nail down exactly what year it is, but I mean, if you listen to the radio and you look at all the cars and you look at the aesthetic, I mean, it's clear that they were trying for a 50s look.
Yes, this is kind of I think this entire movie is a dream, or rather a nightmare, and part of that is that this isn't trying to be a faithful representation of the 50s, because early on when the young son Michael is in class, there are 2 black students in his class.
Right, yeah, it's clearly post-segregation, if that's even a thing in this weird nightmare reality.
Well, that's why I was like, this isn't the real, quote, the real 50s. Like, this is a dreamscape version of the era.
Certainly, yeah. It's not trying to place itself in the realistic social context of the actual 1950s in America. It takes a lot of liberties with that, but it's very, very clear from the aesthetic choices in particular that this is the kind of feeling they're going for.
That's the world they're setting it in.
Right, because it's viewed as like archetypical suburbia, you know what I mean? It is what we envision when we think about classic Norman Rockwell sense of suburbia.
So Michael, from the get-go, kind of has this uneasy feeling about his parents. He doesn't really relate to them. His mother is very sympathetic towards him, but clearly is a little coddling. His mother's Lily, again played by Mary Beth Hurt. And then his father, Nick, played by Randy Quaid, is at the outset pretty stereotypical, he needs to be playing sports and going outside and doing kind of stereotypical, quote, manly things. And Michael is not that kid. Michael is played by Brian Modorsky. This is the only thing he ever acted in. And I get the sense that he was cast not so much for his acting ability, but because he kind of is this kid that they want him to be in the story, in terms of he is very withdrawn, very distant, stuck in his own head. And the movie is so clearly from his perspective, not only narratively, but thematically, and especially the mood of the movie really feels like the nightmare of a kid for 81 minutes.
That's absolutely right. The movie is really kind of a masterwork of perspective when thinking about how we view things through certain characters' eyes. There is really no inciting incident in the first half of this movie that we can really put our finger on as like a plot point that drives things forward. Really, the first 2/3 of the movie are not at all plot driven. It is all just sort of a languid dream that builds character and scenario without kind of focusing on any sort of plot. So we got this family, they move to the town, whatever town it is, and they start a new school year. Michael shows up to school and he's the new kid in class, and he meets this very strange young girl named Sheila Zellner. Sheila is a couple years older possibly than Michael.
Yeah, she says that she's in his class, but she was held back.
Yes, and so naturally she's a little bit more grown up, just has entered puberty, is way taller than him, and she seems to have quite the crush on young Michael. So they develop a really odd friendship, particularly because they are both very unabashedly weird and unafraid to just make up completely weird stories. Like Michael says, I think he says he comes from the moon.
Well, no, she said he asks,
that's right. She says that she comes from the moon. Right.
He says like they came from Massachusetts, and he's like, "Where are you from?" And she's like, "The moon." He completely believes her, and she says like, "Yeah, when you're up there, nobody tells you what to do, and you're free and all this kind of stuff." And at first, you think this is going to be kind of okay, she's messing with him and maybe he'll pick up on her, or maybe she's going to take advantage of him knowing he's so gullible. But that's not what happens. It just ends up being kind of the foundation for their very strange prepubescent courtship.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons that she's so interested in him is that he gets up in front of the class to introduce himself, And the teacher says, why don't you tell us something about yourself? And he says something like, if you take the bones of a black cat and you roast them under the broiler or something like that, you eat them, you can turn invisible, some sort of crazy shit. And you think immediately, like, something's really wrong with this kid. Like, we already have suspicions at this point that his parents, there's just something off about them, but we don't quite know what their relationship is yet. Like, we don't know what their prior life was like before they moved to this suburb. So to know that he is kind of morbid and withdrawn immediately sort of makes you suspicious of, like, there's really something wrong with this kid. And this is how he forms that friendship with Sheila Zellner. And
we find out that there's clearly, I can't say it's necessarily something wrong with him, but that the way that he is absorbing the world and his perspective is pretty directly addressed early on in the movie when Michael has a nightmare. Mm-hmm. This first nightmare scene involves him running and jumping onto his bed. And this is early on I was like, okay, this movie's kind of a little weirder mood wise than I thought it would be. It's not outright jokey or pointed as far as being comedic. This is the moment of the movie where I was like, I don't know what I'm in for. Michael runs to jump on his bed, and
they cut to like an overhead shot of the bed looking down, and you don't suspect anything weird about it. It just looks like an overhead shot of the bed. It's in slow motion. And when Michael lands on the bed, it then caves in and he is in a giant pool of blood. So yeah, it's clear that they just basically stretched the sheet over a giant pool of blood to make it look like the bed. And then the kid, immediately, as soon as he hits the sheet is completely saturated in fake blood. And he starts basically drowning in blood. And that's his nightmare sequence. And it really gives you this impression, because it's in slow motion, that is his nightmare all fucking night. It is so crazy to see, because like in just the few scenes before, like they set up a little bit of that weird dynamic between him and his parents. There's this really wonderful split diopter shot of the boy Michael in the living room with his parents at the table in the background, and they're kind of playing kissy face a little bit. And his dad says, Michael, I think it's time you went to bed. He comes over to Michael, and Michael says he doesn't want to go to bed, I think it is, but Randy Quaid tries to convince him that he goes, you really like the dark, don't you, Michael? You can be yourself in the dark.
Well, that's the thing, is he's that Michael is afraid of the dark, and Randy Quaid, Nick, says, something to the effect of, the only thing you have to be scared of is in here, and he points to his head and starts laughing. And I was like, oh, okay, this is way weirder and genuinely creepier than I had anticipated. And then we get this bloodbed nightmare scene, which then from that same static overhead shot crossfades into an overhead shot of a bowl of like barbecue sauce.
Yeah, or some sort of like red sauce that something is marinating in the kitchen. And we immediately sense that Michael has a, not necessarily an aversion to food, but he has a really strange relationship with food. Like his appetite is kind of poorly developed or something like that. He just has strange hang-ups about food. And what the mom is doing doesn't really seem all that strange. She's cooking what looks like beef tongue or something like that. And it's just something you think like, 50s moms, they're doing that kind of, pot roast beef tongue stuff. It's liver and onions, it's not all that strange. But then the movie uses these little scenes as building blocks to eventually work up to something else.
Well, and Balaban makes sure that anytime he's shooting meat in the movie, that it is bright red or bright pink, that it gets big close-ups, that you really see the awfulness of meat. And I say that as a carnivore, like, it's like,
yeah,
this is monstrous. And a big part of, I think, setting that mood early on has to do with the score. There is orchestrated stuff that is done by Angelo Badalamenti, but the majority of the score is actually done by Jonathan Elias, who does all of this really creepy, ominous ambient stuff that is so pervasive. And it's just that kind of like David Lynch ambient stuff that just immediately puts me on edge.
Oh yeah, it's extraordinarily creepy. And something you talked about, close-ups of food, something that Balaban makes sure to feature when he features those close-ups of food is texture. As Americans, we kind of have aversions to certain textures in food. Like, it's one of the things that really weirds us out about certain foods. It's not flavor, it's a texture thing. You'll hear that all the time from people who have certain aversions to foods. Very, very common. But he makes sure to really show that texture in very sharp focus to make you really not want to eat that. I mean, it's pretty gross. Even the stuff like meatloaf and things like that, he really pays attention to showing that textural element that grosses Michael out so much.
So the movie continues on, and we learn a little bit more about Michael's parents. For example, his dad basically works in the mortuary of this chemical company, Toxico. And this is the only moment in the movie where it feels like, oh, this was the movie I thought I was going to get.
Right.
Because we see an outside establishing shot of the building. It has the company name Toxico. And I'm like, okay, this is what I was expecting.
Right. Sort of broader satirical elements.
Yeah. And, we go inside and we see that Nick has taken his son to work with him. And he's demonstrating this basically chemical warfare thing that they've developed to spray over crops and stuff in some foreign land. It's demented.
Yeah, the whole thing with Nick, played by Randy Quaid at Toxico, is they use things derived from the human body to like make weird chemicals out of to like destroy plants. It's such a strange idea. And luckily there's not a whole lot of stuff that happens at Toxico. Most of the things that happen at Toxico that we see revolve around Nick's interaction with dead bodies, which is immediately suspect.
Yes. And I think this is a good moment to highlight Randy Quaid, because I think when we do our final summations on what we learned in Scary Parents Month, Scary Parents movies seem to be really good showcases for the actors playing the scary parents. I went in like, okay, it's Randy Quaid. I have a knowledge of Randy Quaid's public persona and the majority of his film work, and he is kooky and weird and usually hyperactive and silly, all these kind of things. Randy Quaid scared the fuck out of me in Parents. This is nothing like I've ever seen him do before. It is arguably the best acting I've ever seen him do.
It's certainly one of his best roles. Yeah. And this is not something I expected. I expected, a broader, more satirical or more comically satirical film, I suppose I should say, but a more broad comic satire with him, being Cousin Eddie or something like that from the Vacation movies. I expected that kind of a performance. That's absolutely not what I got. What I got was a performance that is totally at home in a Lynch movie or in Twin Peaks. It is so strange and really deeply frightening.
It's so threatening. He feels every moment he is sharing screen time with Michael, you get the perspective that Michael is terrified of his father, because Randy Quaid's performance is genuinely threatening. There is just this simmering violence underneath him that he seems to be containing in every moment, and just this sinisterness, and he's able to do it with very kind of, almost deadpan deliveries. That there's a moment later in the movie where Michael is walking down the street in the dark, and Randy Quaid pulls up next to him, and he just looks out the window and says, "Want a ride, sport?"
The way the lighting hits his face at that moment where he leans in is like, ugh. It is, again, like we talked about, it's these elements of the filmmaking that really amplify those elements of the performance. It's things working together as they should.
It's great. And I on the subject of performance, Mary Beth Hurt as Lily, the mom, is, I think, just as good. I'm not as familiar with her as an actress, but she is kind of the yin to Nick's yang. She is trying to be nurturing and understanding of Michael and his oddities. But at the same time, it's similar to the stepfather a bit, where it's like, it's so nice that something dark is hiding just underneath the skin.
Right. And she doesn't seem to have a whole lot of concern about Michael's odd behaviors. There is one point where, after his outburst at school about roasting cat bones. And then he draws this very sort of graphic drawing with crayon. The school counselor, the school psychologist, calls his mom to set up an appointment. His mom comes into the school to see this psychologist who is clearly, on the other side of this sort of socio-political spectrum. And we can see all of this in her costuming, her hair and makeup choices, all her props, like so much great nonverbal storytelling, really highlighting the differences between these two characters. You have the conservative suburban mom and the more liberal sort of psychologist. She's smoking a cigarette. And one of the funniest things that happens in the movie, outright funny, is they're having this conversation, and the psychologist, played really brilliantly by Sandy Dennis, she drops her cigarette in the middle of the conversation.
Oh, yeah, the movie takes her, she's like, oops, dropped my cigarette. And the movie sticks with her just leaning down to pick up her cigarette. It's a weird little choice, but it is one of the more outright funny things. But again, it's just not delivered like a joke moment. It's a bit of smart, funny character building.
Mm-hmm. So, of course, this psychologist presents, her concerns about Michael to Michael's mom, and Michael's mom doesn't really seem to think much of it. She seems to think that Michael is just fine, and they're managing to raise the son that they intended to raise.
Mary Beth Hurt's performance sells it, because it'd be very easy to play that scene kind of more Stepford wifey, where it's just like, yes, everything is fine, nothing is wrong, but she plays it really, really well. And the interactions that Michael has with this social worker, I think, again, get a real interesting perspective into Michael's understanding of adults and his fear of their world, or
his lack of understanding of them, really. That's really the driving conflict.
Well, and it may be more particularly his parents, because in this exchange that he has with the social worker, whose name is Millie Dew, which, mildew, which I just bizarre choice. He at one point says to her, "You're not a real grown-up, because real grown-ups don't get upset."
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, I don't have anything to back this up on, but it feels like, did you take that from something a kid really said? Like, because it feels like something a kid would say, and how they would relate to a grown-up and be like, oh, I actually relate to you because you're showcasing your feelings and you don't have that barrier that's programmed into us as we grow up, like to, certain societal norms that we're supposed to uphold.
Well, I think it's easier to see, with the psychologist, that she is a little bit more expressive of her true emotions. And I think Michael is concerned that what his parents present to him is a facade. The trouble with Michael is that he is just young enough to start to grasp that something is off and bad about his parents, but he doesn't have the vocabulary and the mental capabilities yet to understand and articulate and verbalize what he feels is wrong. He knows something is wrong at the visceral level, but can't really explain it.
Well, it's like early on, there's a scene where Michael gets out of bed and he walks into a room and he sees his parents, and it looks like they seem to be in, the throes of coitus.
They be fucking.
To make it sound as appealing as possible. And the way that Balaban shoots this with harsh lights.
Super grainy film, yeah.
Yeah, and all of this, and, smeared lipstick on Randy Quaid, and the kind of fear and anger that is, in specifically Nick's face when he realizes that, they've been caught, and he's like, oh, you're supposed to be in bed or something like that. It is so animalistic. And then that image gets repurposed later in the movie from Michael's perspective to where he sees it as them, feasting on body parts and covered in blood. It's so disturbing.
And eating each other, like devouring each other. Like, Michael flashes back to this at several times during the movie, and every time he flashes back to it, it gets more and more extreme. And that's really what can happen with trauma that we're having difficulty processing, is that every time we remember it and we go over it in our minds again and again and again, without the right tools to process that trauma, it can get more deeply ingrained and misremembered in the way that our memories often misremember them, which is to highlight certain things and gloss over others and amplify certain things about memory. It feels incredibly true in that sense. But one of the skeleton keys, I think, to unlocking the movie happens when Michael's parents go over to the Zellner house, Sheila Zellner's parents. And there's a scene of them, the parents, all four of the parents, sitting around getting shit-faced and playing cards. And we cut away to the kids observing them. That's Sheila and Michael observing them. And Michael asks her, the grown-ups, what are they doing? And she says, I don't know. You can never tell. Last night, my daddy emptied the dishwasher naked. And Michael says, why? And she goes, I don't know. It's really that unlocking of like, this is what the movie is about. It's about being a kid and finding the adult world and the motivations and the actions of adults to be completely impenetrable. It makes no sense to you. It's totally stochastic and random.
To the point where it is alien. Like that this sequence where they're playing cards, for the most part, Balaban puts the camera, over the shoulders of the different adults and in the center of the table. But the way that they carry on, you get the sense of perspective of like, this is weird.
Yeah, that sense of perspective is like watching a documentary of an alien species. Like, this is why the film nails that sense of perspective so hard. It's scenes like this.
And there's other stuff, like there's a moment where Michael is hiding in the pantry, and I'm going to talk more about Balaban's more specific direction choices, and this is one of them, in which it's, like a pretty tight shot of Michael, and then the camera slowly tilts up, and we get to the very top shelf, and there's all these like sausages and everything. Just before it cuts, we see one of the sausages kind of move, to the point where I was like, did that sausage move? Did I make that up?
Oh, yeah.
Then the sequence continues, and we cut back to the sausages, and this is all while Michael is viewing through the slats in the pantry door, his mom cooking. And then the sausages start snaking their way down to Michael and wrapping themselves around him. And to be fair, like, this kind of image and this is like so surreal and ridiculous that, again, this was more kind of the movie I expected.
Right. It's surreal enough and strange enough to be comical. And, that score in that scene is not the creepy sort of ambient Jonathan Elias stuff or the orchestral Badalamenti stuff. This scene is scored with pop music. So it seems like, the sausages, those dried sort of sausages coming down over the shelf and snaking their way around his shoulders and his midsection. It's like, that could be funny, but really what we know at that point in the movie about Michael's relationship to food and meat in particular, it's a deeply creepy scene.
It really is. And the third act of the movie is, I think, Balaban's been doing great work throughout, but the third act is where he kind of goes beautifully nuts.
Oh, yeah. We get another nightmare scene after that is just astounding filmmaking.
Oh, is that the one where he's running down the hallway and
yeah,
and freaking Sheila shows up at the base of his bed? Oh my God, that's so scary.
Yeah, well, he walks out into the hallway and into the kitchen to see an arm out of the garbage disposal and like blood shooting up. And then as he backs away, this like gout of blood starts pouring out of the refrigerator. And then he's running back down the hallway back into his room. And then he goes downstairs. He actually wakes up for real. He goes downstairs to the basement to find a severed leg hanging from a meat hook in the basement. And when he finally sort of pads his way back up the stairs and he clicks the light on in his room, the light reveals Randy Quaid sitting on his bed. And I gasped. What a crazy good jump scare. This is one of the best jump scares in any movie I've seen in years.
It's terrifying.
And there's no music sting. There's no loud sound effect that tells you should be scared. But Randy Quaid just sitting there in the dark on the fucking bed, pants shittingly scary. It's incredible shit, dude.
If you take anything away from this episode, Randy Quaid is so scary. And so in this third act, eventually Michael follows his dad to work. Or no, he actually just goes there to kind of scope it out. And then his dad shows up. And this is when he kind of starts to see, it's like, okay, I really think that this is what they're doing, that they're taking parts from these cadavers and cooking them and eating them. Because for a majority of the movie, it remains kind of ambiguous if this is what's really going on or if it is just Michael's kind of delusion about the distance that he feels from his parents.
Well, the film really sells you on the idea that you're seeing things from Michael's perspective. So we also understand that just because we see something from Michael's perspective doesn't mean it's the diegesis of the film, because we've seen surreal things before that don't turn out to be true. Like in the moving sausages scene, when his mom opens the pantry door to see him standing there, is he wrapped in sausages? No, because it wasn't actually something that happened diegetically in the film. It was something that he felt was happening or was afraid of happening or was a fantasy scene.
But the movie's like so good at seeding this ambiguity throughout, because there's like a scene with the family at dinner, and Michael questions them about, like, we've been eating leftovers ever since we moved here. I'd like to know what they are.
Yeah, this is when plot starts to kick in. You know, before it was really just an exploration of character and setup, and now we're starting to see the plot move forward.
Yes, and in this scene, his parents don't give a straight answer. They're like, you know, they're leftovers from before, Silly. He's like, what were they before they were leftovers? And Nick answers,
leftovers to be.
They were leftovers to be. They never tell him what they are. So you're like, what is this? Like, is this what's really going on? Is this just in this kid's head? And it's not the normal kind of, you know, psychological play that certain movies do. Like, is it real? Is it a dream? Were they dead the whole time? It's all about perspective. And the movie's so good at that. And in this third act, it confirms that, yes, this is what's going on. The parents are cannibals.
Right. Well, we don't really realize that until the psychologist comes to the house.
Oh, my gosh. Okay, so she comes to the house because Michael tells her, like, there is a leg hanging from the ceiling. And she gets there. Of course, there's no leg. And she sees that there's a rat, like, on the windowsill in this basement. And she's, like, trying to shoo it away. And in this moment, a corpse falls out of the window. Another
awesome jump scare. I totally did not expect this. Balaban cut this film. Let's see who's credited with the editing. A guy named Bill Pankow. Let's see what Bill Pankow worked on. Carlito's Way. Snake Eyes, Femme Fatale.
Oh, a lot of De Palma.
Yeah, Black Dahlia. So he's definitely worked with De Palma a few times. He did the remake of Assault on Precinct 13, oddly enough. Anyway, so before he did Parents, this editor did 8 episodes of Tales from the Dark Side, which makes total sense as well. But the timing of this jump scare where the body falls down completely stunned me. It's working on totally different rhythms than we see today in contemporary horror films. I was so shocked by this. And then what happens after the psychologist sees this dead body is she screams, and then the camera pulls back and back and back and back and back, and it follows her scream as it travels up through the vents in the house, and we see the camera snaking backwards up through the vents and up and out through the chimney till we get this big crane shot above the house. It's like, holy shit, this movie works well.
Well, visually, this is the language of the movie saying, we have confirmed the worst, and now the world is broken and insane. And now, as far as that goes, we can do whatever we want because the nightmare is real.
Mm-hmm.
In the moment, I was like, yeah, this feels like a Sam Raimi shot, you know, like, or a setup of, you know, just how kinetic it is. But then thematic, I'm like, yeah, but it's not doing it for fun or for humor.
I mean, it's showy and it's flashy, but it does that for the impact of the moment. And it works like gangbusters. It's so cool.
And it allows Balaban in this third act to do even stranger things. After this, the social worker, she ends up, you know, in the pantry and is getting stabbed at with a knife, and there's some horrible, you know, shots of her, you know, trying to grip the knife, and we never see who it is attacking her, which I love.
It's like a very giallo
yes.
style attack where it's just like a knife and a pair of black gloves.
Yeah, we never see exactly who it is attacking her, but then when Nick and Lily tie Michael up at their table, they have this conversation telling him, you know, it's like, yes, this is what we are and this is who you are and all this kind of stuff. And Balaban mounts the camera over Michael's shoulder onto the table, and the table is just rotating. So the background of the room is always moving by them. And it's just, it's not like it's a total dream idea, but it affected me so much. I was like, this is like, that's why I was like, I get it now. The nightmare has entered real life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The two sort of, have blurred together totally. And the kid is just having a waking nightmare. The psychologist's death is, again, legitimately gasp worthy. Like when the knife comes through the slats in the pantry and she, cuts her fingers on the blade of the knife. I really gasped. That was so upsetting, I thought. And in a movie where, the psychologist doesn't have a whole lot of screen time, but what is there you actually care about, because she's like the only real ally, I think, for Michael. Yeah, Michael has Sheila Zellner, and he has a couple moments with Sheila Zellner that are a little bit heartfelt. Like she actually, plays and wants to engage with him. She hides in the freezer chest in the garage, and of course his father, Michael's father, finds them there and bans him from seeing Sheila Zellner.
Well, and after that, they have a scene where she's basically hiding Michael from his parents because he doesn't want to go home, and they're hiding out in the cab of her parents' car and talking.
Yep. So once the psychologist is dead, we really do feel like all bets are off. Like Michael could die at any moment. And really, we haven't really had that fear that Michael was going to die just yet. I think Michael has been expressing that fear in some strange ways throughout the film, because we haven't quite known what the conflict is for Michael. Do his parents hate him and are planning on killing him? We don't know. Do they want to eat him? He may not know himself, and there's this just sort of general sense of anxiety that he has around his parents. Maybe like, are these people vampires? Like, what the hell is going on here? Now we know exactly what the deal is. They're hacking people up and eating them.
Well, they're not regularly murdering people. They've been taking, pieces from the cadavers, but they obviously, they cook up Millie Dew, and that's what they're trying to feed Michael in that sequence. But this is the moment of like, they want him to be one of them. Like, we want you to join this twisted, warped world. And I think there's a base read of that can just be about eating meat, because Nick has a passing line when at one of their dinners, Michael just doesn't eat. And he says to Lily, he's like, your son, the vegetarian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think really the line that makes this scene what it is Randy Quaid looks down at Michael and says, we're bound for life no matter how much you hate us. Like, that is getting at the fear. Like, when it comes to this movie and the idea of scary parents, it's this idea that if you're raised by monsters, you are bound for life to monsters, no matter how much you hate them.
That you are doomed in a way.
One of the scary truths about parents. Yeah, you're doomed to be like them in some way.
Yeah, which is terrifying. And I think I'm so glad. I mean, this, the magic of our scheduling, we did not intend this, especially for a movie we haven't seen, but the first two movies that we did for Scary Parents Month were really from the scary parents as the protagonists. And the back half were more they were from the children's perspectives. And this is a perspective where it is like, what if your parents, it's not just that they're monsters. It's what if their world is just something you cannot ever see yourself being a part of.
Right. That seems to be the driving conflict of the first 2/3 of the movie, where it just explores the horror of being a kid who seems to be on the outside of all these interactions, who just simply doesn't understand so much of what happens in the world. And Balaban derives a source of horror from that. And that works so well. That nightmare he has later on where he imagines, his parents' sexual desire for one another is being like cannibalism. They're eating each other. They're devouring each other. That image of Randy Quaid with the lipstick smeared all over his face early on in the film is legitimately haunting. Both his parents are sort of pink-faced and sweaty and in their underwear in that scene. And it really does feel like something as a child that you would see and absolutely not understand. It's, what are these adults doing? And then, of course, it explores the more comedic sides of that, with Sheila Zellner saying shit like, my dad emptied the dishwasher in the nude. But this idea that they're going to do things you don't understand, they may be awful people, and you're bound for life. Like, that's really the big statement about parents. And then Oddly enough, the movie in the final act introduces a little bit of a divide between the two parents. Michael actually decides to confront his father with violence and stabs his dad. And then when his dad goes after him, the mom defends Michael and stabs Nick, Randy Quaid's character, on his way down the cellar stairs.
Yeah, and then doesn't he pull the knife out and kill her?
Yeah, and then they fall down together, and that's her death. But man, his fall down the stairs into the basement is like so painful. It's just such a good stunt.
It's a cat and mouse finale, but I like that it culminates with, this big wine shelf that they've had that was set up earlier. That eventually comes crashing down on Randy Quaid, and just all of these wine bottles exploding to, add more visual blood metaphor.
Well, and it's such a good piece of suburban satire as well. Like it's this huge paean to like bougie suburban lifestyle. Like it's a giant wine rack.
Well, and the movie then ends with the gas, which again was also set up earlier. This is a good script as far as like the more, structural stuff goes. I don't think it's that kind of movie, but that stuff is there and it's well executed. And that,
yeah, props to the writer Christopher Hawthorne.
Yeah, and so earlier it's set up that Michael's mom explains that now we have gas, and that's what powers all the stuff in our house, and it's in the pipes, and that's why you have a crack in your ceiling and stuff. So then eventually, of course, the gas pipes have to burst open and the house explodes, but they didn't have the budget to do that, so it's just a cut to white explosion.
Mm-hmm.
But then, nothing's ever put out there about were Michael's parents actually doing this? Was this revealed? No, he just ends up going to live with his grandparents, who seem very nurturing and very caring and very sweet, and Michael seems very comfortable with them. And they put him to bed, and they're in this nice kind of rustic home. And then they leave a sandwich on his bedside table. And there's meat in that sandwich.
There is meat in that sandwich. And there is also a picture of his parents on that bedside table as well. And just like before, we get that really graphic, explicit close-up of that sandwich, really looking at the texture of that meat.
Looks so disgusting.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the image we go out on. And it's, of course, as if to say, the nightmare may not be over. And then there is a jump cut to the end credits that is like blasts you with pop music, and it gives you this like Leave It to Beaver montage of all the cast members walking out the front door of their home and waving to the camera as their name appears on the screen. And it's like, holy shit.
It's
so cool.
They cut to that, and then there's like this, very colorful border design around it. And then it's playing fucking Purple People Eater.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm like, again, this ends on like, oh, that's what I kind of expected this movie to be. Like that kind of cute, I don't want to say cute, but very pointedly funny take on this. But to end on that feels like a bit like we want you to go out with at least some kind of a laugh. And it did. It really made me laugh, but it was also kind of like I was wrapped up in a straitjacket in an asylum laughing type laugh. I'm like, what did I just watch? Parents, I told you when I saw it, and how surprised I was by it. I'm willing to call this art house horror.
Oh yeah, I think it absolutely qualifies it out as art house horror. It is definitively Lynchian. Like, again, I had no idea that Bob Balaban had this kind of stuff rattling around in his head, and was this capable a stylist. I just had no clue. And the screenwriter, Christopher Hawthorne, as far as I know, this is an original screenplay by him, and this is his first credit as a motion picture. So he hasn't really written a whole lot since. He's written a couple of TV movies, one called The Courtyard, one called Whiskers, one called Sea People.
It's all like families, mostly family stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know if Parents was just like, he got it all out. That was it.
Maybe. I don't know. It's a hell of a therapy session, I can tell you that.
It's that kind of a movie, I think, in a way.
Oh, yeah. But really, I think we've been 4 for 4 this month when it comes to Scary Parents movies. I think we've recommended all 4 of the movies that we've done this month really heartily. Serial Mom, of course, is an absolute blast. Extraordinarily funny film. The Stepfather, I think, like you said, is one of the best horror movies of the 80s. Coraline is, of course, a masterfully told fairy tale. And then there's this, which came out of nowhere and hit me with a friggin' left hook.
I would agree that we're 4 for 4. Parents is the one that I find the hardest to recommend.
I don't think many people are going to like it or particularly enjoy it. However, I do think it's great.
I think it's great too. There's stuff in this movie. That bloodbed shot will never leave me.
No.
It was so powerful.
Well, and that shot of, that overhead shot in slow motion looking down at the bed, I did not catch that was a fake bed, like basically just a sheet stretched over a tank full of blood. I didn't spot it until he dives into the bed and the sheet goes completely wet and red in just an instant. And I thought, now this is starting to beat Nightmare on Elm Street at its own game, basically.
I mean, that you talk about great jump scares. That was basically a jump scare for me.
It made me gasp, legitimately.
Well, I mean, I loved Parents. It's I think a tough movie for a lot of people to love. I hope we can help with the putting it out there. Like, it's not the movie that you probably think looking at a video cover, box or seeing kind of the broad appraisal of it out there. It's way weirder and scarier and not nearly the black comedy it's sold as. But holy moly, what a flick. But I think we should wrap up Scary Parents Month with talking about what did we learn about Scary Parents movies and something as a theme. I know we talked about throughout the episodes that we ended up doing a lot of stuff that was about suburbia. And like I said earlier, I think I found out that Scary Parents movies are great for actors. Every single core Scary Parent performance in the 4 movies we did, I think they're not just good, like they're gangbusters great.
Sure, Kathleen Turner. We had, of course, the stepfather, like that
Terry O'Quinn.
That performance, I think is probably my favorite performance that we've seen in the month. But like Terry Hatcher as the other mother in Coraline, and then Randy Quaid and Mary Beth Hurt as the parents in Parents. It's all been, every single one of these movies is a showcase for tremendous acting. I'm so happy that we chose this kind of randomly. I don't remember which of us came up with this idea.
I guarantee it was you. And I think you just threw it out there.
But it's unexpectedly fertile ground for awesome acting. So I think that's a total win. Also for direction, I think this has been a really, really great month. But what does it teach us about our relationship to parents? I think it's way more complicated than scary kid movies. Actually, scary kid movies tend to be pretty samey.
Well, scary kid movies, I think, all tap into very similar fears about our fears of responsibility towards children. The fear that what if a kid, as this entity that you're supposed to help shape turns out to be bad for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when we talk about relationships to parents, that is way more complicated before you even put the scary part into it. Our relationships with parents and how they shaped us and what influences there were, positive and negative, I think force us to confront something that is very difficult for a lot of people, which is that no matter how much you love your parents, if you love your parents, you think they're the greatest people in your life ever, they still had some kind of negative impact on your development.
Oh, yeah, sure. There's no question that every set of parents is going to fuck something up. No question. You could have the best parents in the world. They're going to make some kind of mistake, and that mistake is going to have a lasting impact on your kid.
Yeah, and it does not have to be intentional by any means. It can be completely unintentional and even subversively so.
It doesn't even have to be all that significant.
No.
But it can have lasting impact regardless.
And I think we've seen that more so in the back half of this month, with it being more from the kids' perspectives. Because I think so much of Scary Parents movies seem to be, at least the ones we did, about trying to cultivate this very perfect idea of what you think being a parent should be. And that is simply never going to be possible.
Right. It's presented as an unattainable ideal, particularly in the 3 American movies that we've done. Coraline is not all that American in perspective because the source material and the screenplay are really, really close. And it's a Neil Gaiman story. It's a fundamentally English story.
But I think that element's there with the other mother, wanting to take away the individuality of these kids.
Certainly, but it's not a story about the suburbs like we talked about.
No, that's a very direct suburb like the same kind of theme could be explored with the suburbs and not be about scary parents.
Very true. But I think these movies talk about what we're expected, as American parents to provide for our children. And that is, as Ellen Green puts so succinctly in Little Shop of Horrors, somewhere that's green, a tract house of our own, a fence of real chain link, all that. And the suburbs are, again, fertile ground for horror. They really are quite scary. And every kid who grows up in the suburbs knows that. It might just be because you're a kid and because, just like Parents says, the world of adults and the reason they do things is totally impenetrable. You'll never understand it until you're an adult and you realize that they were just making it up as they went along and doing the best job they could, just like we're all doing now.
I think that's a key thing, too, in the movies that we chose is the first 2 that we did. The kids in those movies are older. They've kind of, passed a big developmental stage. Whereas with Coraline and Parents, we have much younger kids in very formative points in their life.
Mm-hmm. More vulnerable.
Right. More vulnerable, more susceptible to the dangers of the adult world. So, yeah, I think this was such a winning theme considering how kind of random it was. Not just because we saw 4 really good movies. Like this really was just like an amazing run for us.
Oh, yeah. It's probably the best run of like a single month that we've ever had.
Probably.
It's pretty astounding. We really lucked out on this one.
Yeah. And again, that was not, we ended with a movie that we hadn't seen and was not the movie we expected it to be, but ended up probably being better than that movie would have been.
Yeah, absolutely agreed.
So hurrah for Scary Parents Month. We hope you all enjoyed it because we got some great stuff out of this.
Yes. If we had to pull any more great stuff off the shelf, where would you begin?
Well, I was going to say Eraserhead from David Lynch. I told you that before, but in discussing particularly Parents for this week's shelf pick, which, by the way, we encourage you all to submit your own shelf picks at GenreVision.com by commenting on the post for this episode. I was going to do Eraserhead because I figure it's like that's another weird, dreamlike, terrifying family drama, but it's the inverse where it's another, a parent being afraid of their kid, but it's not a creepy kid movie. It's way stranger than that. But in the course of our discussion about Parents, I think a good kind of more digestible palate cleanser would be Matilda.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Matilda is another movie that I think is great at capturing the perspective of a child. It has a supernatural bent, which dips its toes into horror.
It does have a supernatural bent, but I think the thing that would set Matilda apart is Matilda is almost always presented as the adult in the room.
Right.
Even from the prologue of the movie, she is basically presented as an entirely self-sufficient human being. She kind of comes alive when everybody else is out of the house.
It's true.
And she can, do a lot of things for herself. She's portrayed as being self-sufficient. I think the narration in the part of the film is Matilda could do something that most people don't learn to do until their early 30s. They take care of themselves. And that really cut. Thanks, Danny DeVito.
Yeah, and his direction is fantastic in that, just as it has that same kind of energy that Balaban brings and that kind of willingness to do weirder, more surreal things. And I think talking about Henry Selick has kind of that Tim Burton influence.
Yeah, more Sam Raimi, I think, when it comes to Danny DeVito's direction.
That too. But at the same time, Matilda is still a kid, and there are things that she craves as a kid, which is a parental figure. She does not have that in her life.
Right. She really wants that sense of order, and she wants that affection that she's not getting.
Right. And somebody that she sees as, a role model and things like that. But yeah, I would have to go with Matilda. Like, as we were talking about it, I was like, yeah, I'm thinking about Matilda a lot all of a sudden. And also, I think we mentioned it earlier in this year. We both have revisited Matilda recently, and man, that movie should be heralded. Like, that is a great movie.
Yeah, that movie hasn't aged hardly a day, really. I mean, it's just as good as it was at release, if not better.
Yeah.
But I'm going to pull something a little bit stranger, a little bit more obscure off the shelf. It is a movie by Vincent Ward. You might know Vincent Ward as the guy who directed What Dreams May Come. He was also one of the people originally hired to work on Alien 3 before it sort of, found its eventual incarnation as a movie set in a prison. Vincent Ward was the guy that wanted to make it a movie set in a monastery in a miniature planet made of wood. A very sort of fantastical idea. And when you look at Vincent Ward's earlier output, the movies that he made in New Zealand, you sort of see where that fantastical sense of whimsy comes from. The movie I'm recommending today is a movie called Vigil that came out in 1984 in its original native New Zealand. This is a story about a family, sort of an odd family that grows up on a remote farm in New Zealand, and their life is sort of, it almost looks medieval. We know it's sort of set in contemporary the 80s, but there's really not much technology pictured in the film. And then when you look at artwork and pictures from the film, I mean, it looks like it takes place in the Middle Ages. But the story is from the perspective of the young daughter of the family. She is out one day and sees her dad fall from a cliff and die. That's the inciting incident of the movie. And in the weeks to come, a strange man arrives at their farm and starts to weave his way into the daily lives of the family. And she sees him as this intruder to not be trusted. And we have to figure out, like, is this for good reason? Who is this guy really? And it's about how this girl deals with this upset in her family dynamic. And, is, having to deal with this new man as a controlling force and as an influence in her family.
Okay, this sounds interesting.
It is interesting. It's not something I don't think a hell of a lot of you are going to like, but it's probably interesting enough for me to merit a recommendation to you, Drew.
Okay.
And maybe to Danielle if you're listening. Hi, Danielle.
Hi, Danny.
So anyway, that's it. Vigil, 1984, Vincent Ward.
Well, yeah, I gotta check it out because I think the only film I've seen of his is What Dreams May Come, which we did a pretty good episode on, if I do say so myself.
Yeah, not to pat ourselves in the back too hard, but yeah, I think we did a pretty good job with that one.
I do.
Anyway, does that bring us to currently consuming?
Let's do some currently consuming.
Num 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 num.
Travis, what's been on your plate?
I want to talk about two trailers that you and I have watched recently that just kind of surprised us. There was a movie that I had no idea was ever in development, had no idea it was ever in production, didn't know who was directing it, didn't know who was starring in it, had no clue who had written the thing. And then it was earlier this week that this trailer came out for a movie called Underwater. Turns out this is like all the things that you and I like. It's set in a laboratory at the bottom of the ocean. There are lots of like critically maligned movies that take place in laboratories under the ocean. But you know what? You and I are total suckers for that shit. We'll watch every one of them.
We love them. We will go to bat for most, if not all of them in some way.
But this one stars Kristen Stewart and Vincent Cassel.
And somebody else.
Yeah, well, and TJ Miller, which I saw was like, what the fuck is he doing in this movie? I saw a comment on Reddit. Somebody said, TJ Miller, did this movie fall out of a time warp? Turns out it did kind of fall out of a time warp. This was shot in 2017, has been kind of in the can for a while. Mm-hmm. And then Fox delayed it due to the big Disney buyout. And now that that's all complete, it has been put back on the release schedule for January. Drew, what do you think of all this?
Well, the January release is, as most people know, January is considered a dump month.
Particularly like January 10th?
Yes, especially early in the month. But Underwater, like you said, I mean, this is... It when it came out of nowhere, we were like, did they make this movie just for me and Travis? Well, because it's not only... underwater station with scientists, and then there's an earthquake and they're trying to figure out what happened, and we find out that there's maybe some creatures or something going on at the bottom of the ocean. But also the visual language of this movie is pulling so heavily from Alien.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it looks like another Alien movie, basically. Like all the sets and all the cinematography really just reek very heavily of Alien, and not in a rip-off way. Like it actually seems to be sort of executing that pretty well.
No, I mean, there's a couple shots when, you know, they're in some control room or whatever with the lighting. I'm like, this looks straight out of the last two Alien movies we got.
Yep. Yeah, it is very, very, very reminiscent of Covenant and Prometheus in a good way, actually.
Yeah, I mean...
and the DP is Bojan Bazelli, who shot Cure for Wellness.
One of the best-looking films of the frickin' decade as far as wide release goes.
Yeah, so there's all these reasons that you and I are excited to see this movie, even though it is likely going to be the underwater version of that movie Life that neither you or I are terribly crazy about.
No, I mean, I was a little more favorable of it, but it was not something I have any desire to ever see again. But the hope is, it's like, well, you know, Kristen Stewart, she's been doing just like Robert Pattinson. Her post-Twilight work is extremely impressive.
Never not interesting.
The reveal that they spent reportedly $65 million on this movie, that blew my mind.
That's a real deal mid-budget movie these days. We don't really get those.
Nothing gets made for, you know, like 50 to 75 million ever.
Yeah, so this movie is almost certain to be a total box office bomb.
This is...
so, which is why Disney Fox is dumping it in early January. But I'm actually surprised they released a trailer for it this early. I mean, if they were releasing it in January, I probably wouldn't expect to see a trailer until like October, possibly even November, with how these things have been have been marketed recently. Like Ready or Not, I didn't see a trailer, or hear anything about that until a couple of weeks ago. Now it's out.
I think they're trying to do more sleeper stuff, like 10 Cloverfield Lane was like, oh yeah, the trailer movie comes out in like a month or two.
Sure, but that used sort of a brand recognition to get people to show up, and it worked.
Sure, but I think a lot of those movies are. It's like, yeah, we don't need to spend a whole bunch on marketing because the movie's not probably going to make a lot. So why spend a whole year marketing these movies we don't really care about, especially in the Fox department where this is stuff that's getting dumped, post Disney buyout.
I mean, have they forgotten that you can use marketing to make people care?
I mean, I
don't get it.
At least maybe it's just my echo chamber, but the response to Underwater has been like, people in my circle want to see that movie.
Yeah, but our circle's pretty small specifically.
Well, sure. I don't think wide audiences are going to care. Again, it's getting dumped in January. It's really an expected loss that they know they're going to take. But who cares? I really hope we get a good flick out of it, because it looks like it has the potential to be pretty good. Yeah,
well, and the director is the guy who made The Signal. That sort of odd little movie with Lawrence Fishburne in it. Mm-hmm. That was this like micro budget but extraordinarily good looking sci-fi picture. So yeah, I'm ready for what this is going to bring our way. I don't expect it to light me on fire, but it's whatever it's going to do, it's going to look really good while doing it. And it's going to be set in an underwater laboratory and star Kristen Stewart. So it already has a lot going for it. Anyway, next up, another trailer that came out just earlier this week is for a movie called Antlers, which is another movie that has been in the can for a while. It's a Fox movie. It's actually a Searchlight movie, which means it's a little bit more sort of intended to be an indie piece. But my gosh, this is a real looker too. I can't wait to see this flick.
Yeah, I mean, this was produced by Guillermo del Toro. And I know it's based off a short story by Nick Antosca, who's was the, kind of creative drive behind Channel Zero, which we're big fans of.
Yep. He also worked on Hannibal quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I've not read the short story. I'm staying pretty in the dark because the trailer, it hooked me. I don't need to see anything else from the movie. I'm like, yeah, that looks like a really interesting, unique little horror yarn.
Yeah, I've read the short story. It's good. And then I've read an early draft of the screenplay that is a pretty literal adaptation of the short story, but with a new third act. But from the footage in the trailer, which looks incredible, it looks like they've done some work to really flesh it out. So I'm interested to see what the movie brings when it eventually arrives in 2020. I don't think they've set a concrete release date for it, or at least they haven't announced what a concrete release date is going to be for it. But I'm super excited to see it. This is from Scott Cooper, the director of Crazy Heart. Several other movies that kind of all feature the same sort of aesthetic choices, the sort of decline of, factory towns and rural America. He's really into that sort of, that sort of imagery.
Yeah, I'm here for it. I mean, and it showed just enough of the possible monster and whatever the idea behind this is to be like, okay. And yeah, I mean, it's another one that's like, I'm sure they made that for like 10 million or something, but it looks like another $50 million movie.
Yep, I am so here for it. Anyway, what have you been currently consuming?
Well, you mentioned Ready or Not, and I actually just saw that today as we're recording. The hype around this has been crazy. I've heard nothing but glowing responses from it, and that's not just in our circle. Like, the critical response has been overwhelmingly positive. This is another Fox Searchlight movie. It's directed by Radio Silence, which are the collective that did one of my favorite segments from the first VHS anthology horror movie.
The haunted house one, yeah.
Yeah, that was just wonderfully. When I saw that, that was like, oh my God, I had an outline of a movie or a short when I was in high school that was basically that. Where I'm like, I just want to do a haunted house thing where I just have all these weird dreams or ideas from my nightmares, and I just want to do them, and they don't need a bunch of explanation.
That's basically what that short was, but it gets in and out before it overstays its welcome, and is really fun to watch.
Yeah, so Ready or Not, the hype is so real with this one. This is easily... Yeah, it's the most fun I've had at the theater this year.
Really? Okay, all right.
I mean, I won't say it's the best movie that I've seen this year, but in terms of just nailing what it's going for, being really streamlined and simple while not being stupid, or it doesn't feel like the edges have been sanded off at all. It's one of those ones where I'm like, if we got one of these every year, I'd be so happy, where it's this, it's simple, clean, smart, knows what it wants to do, gets in and out in an hour 35, and you feel like, man, that was a really fun time at the movies. But it's not, factory line assembled. The direction is gorgeous. Everybody involved, like across the board, the cast, the crew, they're all on the same page. Everybody gets moments to shine without, stealing the spotlight or stealing the show. It's great. It's really, really, really great. And it makes me hopeful. This is another one where it's like, well, it's another part of the Fox dump, but man, I hope this one doesn't get lost in the shuffle, because it's a gas. I mean, and it's not like a laugh riot, by any means, but it is funny. It's clever. I've mentioned a lot this year, like the term cat and mouse in movies, where I'm like, that stuff's really hard to do to keep me engaged. If it's just people walking around hallways, stalking each other, you got to be really good to do that. This is a whole movie that's based around that idea, and it never feels stale. It never feels boring. It's super engaging. Samara Weaving needs to become a frickin' star. She's so good. Yeah, I can't say enough good things about this. I mean, that said, I can't get to a point where I'm like, this is an exceptional movie in terms of the greater field. It's just like, no, this is like whatever people feel when they go and see these Disney movies, where they're like, yeah, I know what I'm getting and I feel really good and I had a good time with it, and they feel really full and satisfied. That's how I felt after Ready or Not. Not like like with the MCU stuff that we've talked about, where I'm like, yeah, that was fine. It did its job. It's like, I was like, man, I feel full. That was a good meal, and I had a good time, and the movie was doing exactly what it wanted to. Didn't feel like it had to cut corners or trim anything to do what it wanted to do. And it's just damn fun while still being twisted and dark and violent and horror and all these kind of things. Can't recommend it enough. If anybody gets the chance to see it, please go see it in the theater. I'm sure it's only going to be there for like a week, but if it's around you, please, we've been very like, don't go to the theaters anymore because, there's so much horrible stuff going on in the industry this year. But this was one that I'm glad I went out and supported. But let's close things out with our
Comment of the Week.
And of course, I want to mention the shelf picks from last week's episode for Coraline. We had from loyal listener JT Kennel. He recommended The Thief of Always book, which he said, like, if you listen to the show, we have mentioned multiple times. But yes, Thief of Always. Please read that book. It's one of my favorite Clive Barker books. And Ryan Covey, or as he's known in the comments, Bator, recommended another movie that's based on Neil Gaiman work. It's called Mirrormask, which was done with the Jim Henson Company. I've seen Mirrormask. I don't remember much of it except that its creature designs and its fantasy world is inspired by artist Dave McKean, who Gaiman has worked with a lot on like Sandman stuff. And I think, Covey even says it's not a great movie, but it's a very distinct movie, especially for one that's kind of aimed at kids. It's no Coraline by any means, but it is a weird little flick that I'm surprised got made at all.
I've seen enough footage from it to go like, I don't know. It's a very weird look.
It is. I mean, it's especially hard to bring Dave McKean illustrations and ideas into a 3D realized world.
Right. Yeah. There's like certain elements that are like 2D projected onto 3D objects. It's a really bizarre hybrid sort of aesthetic.
It's kind of an art film in the guise of a kid's film. Mm-hmm. Kind of like, and when I say art film, I mean like experimental art, aesthetic type thing. But it's a weird one. I think if you really want to go digging for some weird stuff, that's not a bad one to pick. And then a comment from loyal listener, Mr. Milksteak. And this is the kind of comment we love to hear. Mr. Milksteak says, if I'm being honest here, I've never watched Coraline, even though I knew about it and had coworkers check it out when this one was first released. After listening to this particular episode, I feel like I'm due to give Coraline a shot. Thank you for the friendly reminder. And man, like, if there's anything we want to do by doing this show, it's this.
We like to be sort of a recommendation engine. And that's why Mr. Milksteak gets comment of the week.
So thank you so much. And thank you to the other people who left comments. Like, again, it's been great. So yeah, that closes out Scary Parents Month. And next week, we're going to return to the Police Story saga. This is the last one we're doing. We did the first two Police Story movies earlier in the year. And we're going to close out with Police Story 3 Super Cop. Very excited for this one because Police Story and Police Story 2 were two of the best movies we've watched this year.
Yeah, and I hear Super Cop is no exception. So we'll see you next week for Police Story 3, a.k.a. Super Cop, which is what it was called when it got released over here in the Americas. So once again, I'm Drew Deitch.
I'm Travis Newton.
This has been another episode of GenreVision. Thanks again for listening to Scary Parents Month. And we'll see you next week. I'm just that tired. I legitimately didn't even think that I...
You switched the names around?
I didn't even... Yeah, I that was not intentional, I guarantee you. It's 12:27 a.m. right now as I'm staring at my computer screen. I just want to go to bed. All right. See you guys.